The mammoth awakening. The sky is still black when the first whispers of movement stir within the sleeping camp. Somewhere beneath a canopy of fur and hide, a baby lets out a soft grunt. Nearby, an elder snores like distant thunder. But most of the camp is already rising, silently, like mist lifting off the earth. Cold seeps into every crack of every bone. It's a sharp, awake kind of cold. The kind that pinches your earlobes and makes your breath hang in the air like smoke. A hunter rubs sleep from his eyes and stretches, bones cracking like twigs. He's young, maybe 17 winters old, and today he'll help track giants. His mother is already tending to the fire, feeding it with dried dung and slivers of bone. The flame flares up, warming a pot of fatty broth that smells faintly like smoked mammoth and desperation. They don't eat much before a hunt, just enough to keep the legs moving and the stomach from growling louder than a cave bear. Welcome to the mammoth morning ritual. Icy fingers, thick fog, and the weight of survival pressing against every sinew. So before you enjoy the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Now let's go back, way back. The world of these early humans is enormous, wild, and indifferent. Stretching from the tundra of northern Europe to the grassy mammoth steppes of North America, it's filled with great beasts, towering mammoths, woolly rhinos, shaggy bison the size of compact cars. But food doesn't exactly fall into your lap. You've got to chase it, sometimes for days, weeks, or even across entire continents. In this frozen wilderness, mammoths are everything. They're meat, bones, tusks, tools, tents, thread, needles, and status symbols all in one. And when the herds start moving, humans follow because staying put means starving. The tribe moves in small bands, never more than 30 or 40 souls. That's the magic number. Big enough to protect each other, small enough not to scare off prey. Each member has a role. The elders remember when the rivers froze. The children carry baskets and ask too many questions. And the hunters? They rise before the sun. One of the elders, a toothless man named Harak who wears a necklace of squirrel tails, swears he can smell mammoths in the air. He says they always come when the birch trees start leaking sap, and when the hairs turn brown again. No one argues with Harak. He's been around since the glaciers first sneezed. The air is thick with tension. The herds haven't been seen in weeks. Food stores are down to dried marrow and frozen beetles. If they don't find the giant soon, they'll have to split the band, and nobody wants that. Just as the sky begins to blush with pale light, someone whistles. 3 sharp notes. It's the lookout, perched on a ridge. He waves an arm toward the horizon. Movement. At first, it's just a shimmer, like heat rising off a summer rock. But then it becomes clearer, huge shapes moving slowly, deliberately. Mammoths, a whole herd of them, at least 20 strong, trudging across the low hills like boulders on parade. Excitement surges through the camp like wildfire. The trackers leap into action, slinging their fur packs and smearing charcoal on their faces. Spears are checked, flint points examined, bindings retightened with sinew. It's not just about stabbing a beast and calling it a day. Hunting mammoths is a strategy game that lasts for miles. It's like playing chess against a bus-sized opponent that can trample you into soup. They won't attack today. Today is for watching. The lead tracker, a woman named Senna with a scar down one cheek, gestures for silence. She dips her fingers into a pouch of crushed herbs and presses them to her nose. Some say it helps you smell better. Others think it just masks human scent. Either way, it smells like dirt and dreams. Senna kneels to examine a shallow depression in the mud. It's still damp. A rear mammoth foot. She whispers, maybe 2 hours old. Nearby, there's a trail of dung, steaming slightly with bits of grass and bark inside. That's dinner for someone tonight, believe it or not. Mammoth droppings are like nature's trail mix. Not for humans, though, those go to the dogs. And speaking of dogs, yes, they're here. Not the fluffy Labradors of today, but scrappy, wolfish proto-dogs. They sniff and yip and occasionally roll in things that no one wants to smell twice. They're still halfway wild, but they know when food's on the move. The group sets off, slow and quiet. Every crunch of snow underfoot is a risk. One snapped twig and the herd could bolt, disappearing into the hills for days. So they walk like ghosts, sometimes crawling on all fours, sometimes belly sliding down icy slopes. Along the way, they pass familiar markers. A stone with ochre streaks. A tree where someone carved antelope shapes last spring. The land holds memory. That's how they navigate, no maps, no compasses. Just knowledge passed through bone and story. Here's your strange fact of the day. Some prehistoric people believed mammoths weren't real animals at all, but massive underground creatures that only surfaced to die. That's probably because they kept finding their bones in strange places, buried deep, far from water. Not quite right, but hey, it's better than thinking they fell from the sky. As the sun climbs higher, The group halts beneath a rocky overhang. Time for rest. One hunter produces a sling and starts carving bits of dried root. Another tunes a bone flute, its high notes warbling into the air like distant birdsong. You'd think silence was essential on a hunt. But music? Music keeps the heart calm. It reminds you you're not just a hungry animal following bigger hungry animals. A child sneezes. Everyone freezes. The mammoths, grazing in the valley below, pause too. One flicks an ear the size of a blanket. Another flares its trunk and lets out a low rumble, like a volcano clearing its throat. But then, the herd moves on, slow, deliberate, unbothered. Relief washes over the hunters. Not today, but soon. And when the time comes, when the wind shifts and the ground shakes and the lead cow veers toward the gorge, that's when they'll make their move. But for now, they watch. They wait. They learn. Because to hunt a giant, you first have to understand how it thinks. Signs in the dust. By the time the mammoths vanish over the ridge, their scent lingers in the air like burnt wood. The hunters descend from their perch, but they don't follow immediately. First, they gather at the base of a large tree and drop to their knees. What comes next is not chasing, it's reading. And the land, if you know how to look, has a story to tell. Senna, the tracker with the scar, runs her fingers through a patch of churned-up soil. She doesn't speak, but the message is clear. The herd was here, maybe 4 hours ago, and they weren't moving fast. That means they're grazing, maybe bedding down for the night somewhere close. But it also means they're cautious. Mammoths don't relax unless they sense dangers far away. One boy leans forward and pokes at something in the dirt. It's a flattened sprig of moss, crushed but not torn. He looks to Senna wide-eyed. Rear foot, she says. Big one, male. He walks heavy. She points to a nearby indentation, much smaller and more delicate. And that's a calf, probably 2 winters old. It's like watching someone read a novel in a language you don't know. But to these hunters, the dirt is a library. Scuffs, cracked twigs, broken reeds, and even the angle of a crushed beetle wing. They're all clues. Like detectives with spears, they can tell if the herd is tired, panicked, breeding, or sick. The strange detail? Sometimes they follow birds. Specifically oxpeckers, those tiny, red-beaked hitchhikers that ride on the backs of large mammals. You see a flock swooping low across the horizon? Chances are something huge is under it. It's not foolproof, but when your stomach is chewing on your spine, even a bird becomes a beacon. As the group sets off, they break into smaller cells, each with a silent task. Some circle to the east, skirting the herd's flank to stay downwind. Others take higher ground to scan for movement. Senna's team stays low and watches the trail. This is the art of the stalk, not moving fast but moving right. Along the way, they encounter old tracks layered beneath the new ones. Senna frowns. These are 3 days old, she mutters. Different herd. And then, brighter, they crossed paths here. That's why the trail splits. See, mammoths aren't always predictable. They're not like modern elk or wildebeests with tidy migration patterns. Sometimes they veer off course because of storms, predators, or even mood. Yes, mood. Mammoths could be temperamental. One ancient tusk found in Siberia showed deep gouges, battle scars from mammoth-on-mammoth duels. These creatures had egos the size of huts. But the hunters? They've got patience. One man crouches near a pile of dung. Fresh, still warm. He takes a stick, pokes it, and smiles. Still soft, he says. Less than 2 hours. No one questions how he knows. No one wants to know. It's a job for the bold and the slightly nose-blind. They continue in silence, stepping around frozen puddles and weaving through tree skeletons. The light grows golden. Shadows stretch like fingers. And suddenly, Senna raises a fist. Everyone freezes. She points ahead, toward a low patch of brush. It rustles. Slowly, rhythmically. There's a whisper of air, the sound of branches being nibbled. They creep forward, just enough to see. A juvenile mammoth, maybe 6 years old, is chewing on a willow trunk. Its ears flap gently, and its sides rise and fall in lazy rhythm. It's alone, but that's not good. Mammoths don't wander off like moody teenagers. If this one is here, the rest can't be far. Senna gestures backward. Time to pull away. This isn't the moment to attack. It's the moment to map the herd, to find their sleep zone, where the big bulls take the outer circle and the calves huddle in the middle. That's the only time an ambush might work. And even then, it's risky. One wrong move and it becomes you who gets trampled. Back at the temporary camp, the scouts regroup. They draw crude lines in the dirt with sticks, tracking the direction, wind flow, terrain, even elevation. The elder Harak watches the process and nods. He leans in and murmurs. North slope, dry grass. They'll sleep there. How do you know? asks the same boy who found the calf's print. Harak grins, showing 3 teeth. Because I've slept there too. You learn a mammoth's habits by pretending to be one. The fire crackles. Someone hands out strips of dried liver. The hunters eat slowly, saving energy. In the background, one man sharpens his spear with methodical strokes. Shik, shik, shik. Like a lullaby for killers. Then, out of nowhere, a joke. Bet the mammoths are watching us right now, placing bets on which one of us will fall in the river again. A ripple of laughter. Humor, it turns out, is one of humanity's earliest survival tools. You can't outrun a mammoth, but you can laugh while limping after one. A light snow begins to fall. It dusts the tracker's hair and turns the mammoth trail into soft, shifting white. That's the danger of tracking in winter. The earth can hide its stories under a few careless flakes. But it also means that prints become clearer, and warm bodies melt snow. Every footstep becomes a glowing signature. They press on. By dawn, they'll be within striking distance. The question is, will the herd lead them to an open valley or into a trap? That's the gamble of the trail. One day you're the hunter. The next, you're the one leaving signs in the dust. Crossing the white wastes, snow lashes sideways, turning the horizon into a wall of milk. The wind howls, dragging sleet and ice across the open steppe like knives. Visibility, about the same as trying to find a contact lens in a sandstorm. Blind and cold and deeply unpleasant. But the hunters move forward, their eyes squinting into the blizzard, their cloaks drawn tight with sinew cords, their breath forming clouds that vanish in an instant. They're chasing shadows. The mammoths passed this way, probably just hours ago. But in this weather, everything becomes uncertain. A single gust can erase a day's worth of tracks. But the hunters press on, boots wrapped in bark and rawhide, crude snowshoes strapped to their feet with strips of frozen tendon. Not quite REI material, but enough to keep them from sinking hip-deep with every step. This isn't just another hunt. This is a crossing, a migration of hunters following migrating prey. One herd across one continent isn't enough anymore. The animals are moving farther, following weather patterns, forage, and instincts buried deeper than any language. And humans, stubborn creatures that they are, follow too. Because when you ride the same trails as your dinner, you go wherever your dinner goes, even if it's over a land bridge to a brand new world. The Bering Land Bridge wasn't always buried beneath the Bering Sea. For thousands of years during the Ice Age, it was a frozen highway between Siberia and Alaska. Wind-blasted, treeless, and about as friendly as a grizzly with a toothache. But to Ice Age hunters, it was a miracle. A strip of earth that let them chase herds across continents. Senna, our season tracker, has done this crossing once before. She remembers the sound her bones made when she slept directly on ice, like wood creaking under pressure. This time, she's packed better. Her furs are layered thick. Her feet are coated in a strange mixture of bear grease and moss to stave off frostbite. Not comfy, but effective. A lesser-known fact? Some groups carried glowing fungus wrapped in hide to help light their way during long nights. Bioluminescent lichen, nature's flashlight, if a bit smelly. The white wastes are unforgiving. Frost forms inside nostrils. Eyelids freeze shut if you blink too slowly. Firewood becomes a luxury. When there are no trees, you burn whatever you can find. Dung, bone, even blubber-soaked moss. And still, they press on. The wind shifts. Senna lifts her head. They're barely visible mammoth shapes lumbering in the distance. Not just any mammoths. Northern tundra giants, with shag thicker than a yak in a snowstorm and tusks that curve like angry moons. They're heading northeast, following a wide arc along the windbreak of the low hills. That's good. Open plains are death traps for hunters in this weather. Behind her, the team readies their weapons, not for an attack, but for the worst. In blizzard country, nature doesn't need to kill you directly. It just has to make you fall behind. One hunter stumbles. His snowshoe strap snaps with a quiet twang. He tumbles sideways into a drift, arms flailing like a squashed beetle. The group stops. No one speaks. Helping costs time. But leaving him, that costs trust. Senna turns back, grabs his hand, and yanks him out. "Tie it with your teeth if you have to," she mutters, half smiling. Even out here, a joke can warm you faster than a fire. They travel single file now, boots crunching rhythmically. Every so often, someone raises a hand to point. Broken branches, a steaming pile of dung, a mammoth tusk scraped clean by the animal rubbing off parasites. These signs, small and fleeting, are their compass. As night falls, they find shelter in a natural bowl carved into the rock by centuries of wind. It's not much, just enough to block the gusts. They light a tiny fire, fueled by ancient resin and shredded hide. Dinner is boiled bone broth with lumps of frozen marrow and a few bitter berries someone found under a drift. Tastes like defeat with a hint of dirt. They huddle together, backs touching for warmth. The dogs curl in their laps. One begins to snore, a soft, raspy sound like a mouse trying to whistle. Senna keeps watch, eyes scanning the white void for any movement. Somewhere out there, the mammoths are resting. One day's head start, maybe less. Across the fire, the youngest boy, barely old enough to lift a spear, asks, "Why do we keep following them? Why not hunt smaller things?" Senna thinks for a long time. Then she says, "Because rabbits won't feed your cousins. Or your cousin's cousins. One mammoth? One mammoth feeds us all." There's more to it than that. Mammoths aren't just prey. They're the rhythm of the people. When they move, everything moves. Stories, tools, homes, rituals. They're like seasons with legs. The next morning, the storm breaks. Sunlight spills across the ice, revealing a wonderland of pale blue shadows and glittering frost. And there, at the base of the northern ridge, hoofprints. Dozens. No, hundreds. Crisscrossing, looping, thick as brushstrokes. The herd has paused. Excitement ripples through the group. They climb to the ridge and see them. Mammoths, a whole herd, grazing quietly in a sunlit hollow. Calves nudging snow with their trunks. Bulls swaying gently. A mother lifting her baby over a fallen log. It's breathtaking. Senna exhales slowly. She's seen this a dozen times, but it never gets old. Here's your historically accurate fact for the day. Many Ice Age hunters used natural gullies, ice pits, or constructed wooden fences to funnel mammoths toward traps or kill zones. Ambushing one of these creatures was never random. It took planning, coordination, and a whole lot of praying to the mammoth gods. The team sets their plan. There's a narrow canyon just ahead, walls high, ground soft. If they spook the herd from behind, it might funnel through. If they can isolate one, just one, they'll have food for a moon cycle. But first, they wait. One last rest before the final charge. The white wastes are behind them now. The blood will come later. For now, the hunters sit in the snow, watching giants graze beneath the sky, and whispering thanks to the land that never stops moving. Fire, fat, and frozen nights. The mammoths are close, so close you can smell them. Not the sweet musk of a domesticated animal, but the raw, grassy funk of something that eats a forest for breakfast and weighs as much as a small bus. The hunters crouch just beyond the ridge, noses dripping, fingers twitching near spear shafts, eyes fixed on the herd as if trying to will the animals into standing still forever. But they can't rush it. One false move, one snapped twig, and the herd will vanish like ghosts into the frozen wind. So the hunters wait, pressed together for warmth, stomachs rumbling in unison. Surviving a prehistoric hunt wasn't just about weapons. It was about endurance, and that meant mastering the slow, brutal art of staying alive through cold nights, empty bellies, and long stretches of nothing happening. By now, the group has gone days with only scattered bits of food. They chew dried meat like it's a treasure, slice frozen fat into thin slivers, and pass around a ball of grease and berries wrapped in hide. A prehistoric energy bar, minus the shiny wrapper. It's greasy, gritty, and smells faintly of moldy yak. But it gets the job done. Senna rubs her palms together and blows on her fingers. The fire burns low, nestled between carefully stacked stones that trap heat and hide light. Fire is more than warmth, it's protection. A dancing perimeter of safety. Without it, frostbite sets in fast. Predators creep closer. Morale withers. Here's a strange detail. Some groups during this era would sleep with warm stones tucked under their clothes. Not cuddly, but surprisingly effective. And if you didn't have warm stones, you shared body heat whether you liked your neighbors or not. At night, they tell stories. It's tradition, ritual, even. One elder chants the tale of a woman who outran a saber-tooth by leaping into a hot spring. Another speaks of a child who was born in a snowstorm and never felt cold again. The children listen, eyes wide, trying to forget their numb toes. Stories, laughter, even complaints, all are fuel. Not for the fire, but for the soul. Meanwhile, the herd sleeps. Mammoths take turns watching, like massive sentries in a wool coat. Their breath fogs the night air. Their calves nestle under their mothers' bellies, warming against the cold ground. It's peaceful, almost idyllic, except for the knowledge that, in the morning, blood may spill. The plan is simple. If anything involving a 10,000-pound animal can be called simple. Split the herd, guide one toward a natural trap, then strike fast and hard before the rest can circle back. They've scouted a narrow ravine nearby. Steep walls, snow-covered floor, and just enough room for a confused mammoth to blunder into trouble. But plans are slippery in the wild. Dawn arrives like a whisper. The wind dies. The world hushes. Even the birds seem to pause. The hunters rise. They eat nothing. Just sip melted snow and rub bare grease onto exposed skin. It's go time. They fan out like a net. Senna moves left with a team of 3. The rest loop wide, clapping stones together and hooting like owls. The goal is confusion, controlled chaos. It works. The herd startles. Mammoths trumpet and wheel. Snow erupts under their feet. The young ones scream in their strange, trumpety way. And just like that, a single male, a younger bull, breaks away. That's their target. He runs, confused, straight toward the ravine. The hunters close in, shouting, throwing stones, not to hit, but to guide. He barrels forward, trunk flailing, tusks cutting the air. Then he slips. His front legs slide out from under him. The slope is slick with snow and ice, and his own momentum does the rest. Down he goes, crashing, skidding, bellowing in rage and fear. When he hits bottom, he tries to rise. He can't. His leg is twisted, his side heaving. The hunters move in. Fast. Spears rise. They don't cheer. They don't gloat. Taking down a mammoth is not a victory. It's a burden. This is food, yes, but it's also tools, shelter, clothing. It's weeks of work. It's bones to carve into needles and ivory to carve into memories. Nothing goes to waste. Senna kneels beside the fallen beast and places her hand on its forehead. For a long moment, she says nothing. Then, softly, "Thank you." They work quickly. Fire is built on a ledge above, where wind won't steal the flame. Fat is the first priority. It burns, cooks, and keeps them warm. They render it into a thick soup that steams in hide pots. Someone finds the liver and yells. Liver means a fresh kill, a good omen. They smear blood on their faces in thin lines. One for luck, one for thanks, one for the next hunt. As the sun sinks behind the hills, the smell of roasted meat fills the ravine. It's greasy, smoky, and oddly sweet. For the first time in days, the children smile with mouths full of warmth. One boy tries to juggle mammoth testicles. It ends poorly but gets a hearty round of laughter. And laughter? That's worth its weight in wool. Here's your historically accurate fact for the day. Ice Age hunters often built temporary shelters out of mammoth bones and hides. One structure found in modern-day Ukraine had a circular base of tusks and skulls, covered in mammoth skin like some kind of prehistoric yurt. So yes, sometimes the very thing you hunted became the roof over your head. That night, they sleep deeply, not from comfort but exhaustion. The stars above twinkle with quiet approval. Somewhere in the dark, wolves howl, but they do not approach. Not tonight, because tonight the fire burns high, because tonight the hunters are full, because tonight the cold loses, the final trail, the bones are clean, stripped of meat, split for marrow, scraped of fat and sinew. The skeleton of the young bull mammoth lies half buried in the snow like a monument. A few ribs jut upward, crooked and yellowed, like the frame of a sunken ship. Around it, the hunters move with quiet precision, gathering the last usable bits. A fragment of tendon for bowstring, a tooth for carving, a small sliver of ivory to be etched later with memory. They've eaten well. They've rested. Now they must move again. The mammoth herds do not wait for grief or gratitude. They walk. They always walk. And so, the hunters pack what they can carry and leave behind what they cannot. A few broken spears. A pile of cracked bones. Footprints in the snow. Centuries later, those footprints will become fossils. We are now in the realm of echoes. As the group begins its march across the tundra once more, the older children are tasked with smoothing the ashes of their last fire pit. Not out of shame, but out of respect. Leave the land as clean as you found it, Senna murmurs. And the spirits might leave your next shelter intact. They laugh a little, because nothing is ever left perfectly clean when you're traveling with 10 people and a half-eaten mammoth liver in your pack. But the message holds. Across the landscape, faint paths can still be seen. Animal trails, worn crossings at riverbeds, grooves carved into the earth where generations of beasts and humans have passed. These trails are ancient, older than language, and they connect the bones of the world like threads in a mammoth hide net. Senna pauses near a flat patch of earth where mud has frozen in strange ridges. She crouches and brushes away a thin layer of ice. There, beneath her palm, are old tracks. Human ones. Dozens. Some tiny, likely children. Some deep and wide. Adult men and women, hunters just like them, long vanished. She smiles. We weren't the first to come this way. Later, around the fire, someone tells the story of a giant who wandered across the world on feet the size of boats. He chased the sun but could never catch it, and wherever he stepped, rivers appeared. When he died, they say, his bones turned into the first mammoths. It's clearly myth, but in a world where the line between story and survival is blurry, it holds a certain weight. Here's a lesser-known truth. Early humans were among the first to record their travels, not in writing but in art. In France, Spain, and other regions once covered in mammoth steppes, we found cave paintings showing massive herds, hunting scenes, and long journeys. Some even include handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into stone as if to say, I was here. That's not too different from today's Instagram check-ins. Just, with more charcoal and fewer hashtags. The next day, the hunters arrive at a cliff overlooking a river valley. The ice below is cracked and blue, glinting in the sun like a frozen mirror. Across it, in the far distance, tiny dots move against the snowline. Mammoths, again. There's a moment of silence, half joy, half exhaustion. They'll follow. Of course they will. That's the rhythm of this life. Find, track, chase, rest. Then start again. Every herd is a moving feast, a migrating calendar, a reason to keep walking. Senna gathers the younger hunters and begins teaching. She points to a muddy patch and asks, "How many passed here?" The boy squints. 10, 15, she corrects. And one was limping. "Look, drag mark." She points again. "Now, what does that mean for predators?" They answer in chorus. "Wolves target the weak. And what do we target? The slow." Exactly. It's not a lesson in cruelty. It's a lesson in survival. One passed down for tens of thousands of years. Not just in words, but in motion. In footsteps. In shared meals. In calloused hands pressed against cold earth. They spend that night in a cave with soot-stained walls. Inside, someone begins to draw. A mammoth, roughly shaped, tusks curved, trunk raised. Around it, human figures with spears. A familiar scene etched now into stone. Senna watches the artist and smiles. "Make it bigger," she says. "Let them know it was a big one. This is more than graffiti. It's record-keeping. It's memory preservation. It's how future generations, hundreds, even thousands of years later, will come to understand what life was like when giants walked the earth. And now, we are those future generations." Modern archaeologists crawl through caves and unearth spear points, shattered bones, and fossilized footprints. They examine old hearths filled with burnt bone and trace migration routes using pollen, ash layers, and ancient DNA. They piece together the movements of early humans, not through maps or diaries, but through leftovers. We now know that Ice Age hunters crossed entire continents, that they followed mammoths across Europe, Asia, and into the Americas, that they left marks in the land, in each other, in the bones of the creatures they tracked. And in a strange twist of fate, it is we who now track them. We follow the footprints they once followed. We dig into the dust for clues. We scan cave ceilings for soot-smudged mammoths and decipher the stories left behind in broken spearheads and scraped ivory. One final thought. Some of the best preserved mammoth kill sites are found in North America, buried under layers of floodplain silt. In one such place, the bones of a mammoth were found surrounded by dozens of flint points, evidence of a concerted community effort. It wasn't a lone warrior bringing down a beast. It was a group, family, a tribe, just like Senna's. Their story ended long ago, but their trail is still here. You're walking on it. Every time you see an ancient cave painting, a fossilized footprint, or even the rough outline of a mammoth tusk in a museum glass case, you're standing on the final trail of the first hunters, the ones who followed giants not for glory, not for conquest, but for life. And somehow, across the millennia, they're still whispering to us in charcoal and stone. We were here. We walked with giants. We followed the herds, and they led us home.